Welcome to the Axios yacht.
Thank you for having me. It's beautiful here.
We are talking about the open internet. So let's start big picture. What's the state of it?
Do you want the honest truth?
Why not? We're among friends here.
The honest truth to me, and this is somebody who sits inside of the open internet, so maybe to frame my index's role for a second. Our company's been around for 20 years, internet-based company. We sit on the sell side of the market, which means just about every major media company on the planet is a customer of Index. So we kind of have a pretty good gauge as to the state. I would argue that it's pretty dire right now. The open internet at large, and if you're not kind of familiar with that term, you can encapsulate just about everything you see on the web, in app, connected television, the Spotify remarks and audio into one bucket. We're on a decade-long losing streak to the walled gardens. The walled gardens being the Googles and the Metas of the world and the TikToks and the Amazons. And that decade-long losing streak is the share of media spend or marketer wallet going to the open internet versus the walled gardens. For a decade, it has continued to shrink.
So, we've heard this. I've heard this before. You said we've gone on a decade. What does it mean, right? What are the consequences of that?
The consequences are pretty dire, and if you speak candidly to a publisher today who has to fund content, staff a newsroom, you're one. It's harder than ever to be a publisher, especially on the open internet, and it's not getting better. It's actually, if anything, getting a little harder, and so the consequences are dire. And I'd also argue today the open internet is funded from what remains. If Meta and Google can fill the budget, they'll fill it. Some remainder is currently what we all use to fund everything else.
I mean, you mentioned I run a newsroom, and so I've been looking at these charts now for 15 years probably, and I know the direction they go. So I've lived this personally. Can you give us a sense of a warning outside of even the publishing, to a normal person, when this goes away or if it's not arrested, what happens?
Well, I think there's a value exchange that's just not really well appreciated between the consumer and content that I wish more people were aware of. When you open a website or an app that you haven't paid for, there's only one way that media company or owner is paid, and it's whatever ads you see, because nothing else is paying them. What you paid to Spectrum for your internet connection is not going to a publisher. What you pay to Apple or your cell phone provider is not going to a publisher. So unless there's some kind of advertising, they're literally providing that content for free. And so the ads effectively pay the bills, and increasingly the ads are paying the publishers less every successive year.
So if you think about any place on the web that you go to where you're not swiping a credit card, that's at risk of going away, the direction we're going.
Absolutely. Having been in this business for 20 years, I can tell you, I literally spend most of my life going to either at the company building with our engineers or going to visit our publisher customers. And a decade ago, 20 years ago, I would go to bigger buildings with many floors and many rooms and so many people. And I can tell you, increasingly, I'm going to smaller buildings or virtual meetings as well, because they've let the building go where teams are smaller. So the direction of travel, I think, to the end consumer is not great, because I think long term, it does sort of suggest that the ability for media to keep our democracies in check and to keep everybody in check is becoming compromised. And I think as a result, that starts to create all kinds of ripples to the end consumer that are not really fully appreciated at this stage.
So what do we do? It's give us a path out of this wilderness.
And I don't mean to be overly dire, but I have to be, because I do think, when you hear somebody in ad tech land, and we are on Yacht Row, Axios aside, most of the companies here are in ad tech, at least on this particular block. A lot of them will talk about the open internet in the positive. We are making this work, and I think it's just divorced from reality. If you ask any publisher who is a customer of ad tech, they disagree. So we have to face facts. Now, the good news is...
The first step, admitting you have a problem.
I think you have to admit you have a problem. And I think some unfortunately, people in this space don't. And I think that's problematic. The second thing you do is something about it. And like the good news is I'm not like here espousing some hopeful promise that will eventually solve the problem. There's actually a lot of momentum behind an idea of fundamentally resetting the way we drive outcomes across the open internet for marketers and fund content. And it's a bit of a it's a little bit technical and it's a little bit complex, but I can kind of sum it up using like a few different analogies. One of them being, we look at walled gardens today as sort of what works. And so what does that really mean? It means, inside of Meta or inside of Google, you have this incredible environment where there's so much signal and so much data, and you have a closed system. And that makes it A, really easy to buy, and B, allows them to use that data to drive great outcomes for marketers. It works really, really well. So like if that's the best practice, and I'd argue that they've nailed it, what do we have? Well, we have the open internet, which is amazing. It's inherently democratized. There's nobody controlling it. You can work with anybody you want. There's a lot of freedom. However, frankly, it's a little bit of a mess. I would argue that the open internet today is something like a messy garden. Right. It's open. Anyone can go visit it. But like, it's not really well kept. It's a little chaotic. It's kind of like a labyrinth. You don't really know where to go. It's exhausting to buy, and it is not driving the same level of outcomes. The next trick for the open internet is to mimic the value of the closed ecosystem of the walled gardens, but do it in an open way. And it sounds kind of complicated, but it is in motion right now. And a lot of it has to do with rethinking the way we transact in this market. We transact in this market in this really fragmented way, and we're starting to change that. We're starting to move people in closer proximity so that we can orchestrate each other. And that eventually will be an open garden that isn't a mess, but is really well organized and well orchestrated, not exhausting to buy, really easy to buy, and also can drive better outcomes.
This is a part of the denizens of the open internet working somewhat in concert to bring that sensibility to it.
That's exactly what it is. And so to some degree, it also requires people to kind of drop their arms. Everybody on the open internet is kind of a competitor. And so on one hand, it's so incredible. Nobody controls it. It's amazing. Like I started, before we started Index, I was a kid on the internet in the 90s. I made websites. They got really popular. Ad tech found me. I've never left. I love this business, and I love that, even as a young publisher, I could fund my operation from ads. You can't really do that today, but I want to get back to that. The thing is, the apparatus that enabled that has been completely dismantled by what Google and Meta can do, because Google and Meta don't really sell ads anymore. They sell outcomes. And we have to find a way to match that.
If we don't solve this, like what's the warning to the people on the open internet, the ones you say who have to drop their arms to work together? If they don't, where is this going?
To me, you don't even have to take my word for it. Just look at the charts. The decade-long losing streak becomes a 2-decade-long losing streak because the charts are perfectly linear. What does that mean? It means each successive year, a little less money funds content, a little less money funds everybody that supports it, and the direction of travel doesn't change. I think that's the honest truth. It's not like it's not going to be an asteroid hitting the internet at all. It's just going to be this continued slow bleed.
We know the way the lines are going,
yeah,
right?
just follow the chart.
Well, then let's end on a happy note, right? Like, come on, we're in the south of France. It's nice. If we get it right, what can we look forward
Well,
to?
if we get it right, I hope that publishers can start to wrestle back media spend from marketers, staff those newsrooms, grow those buildings, create richer experiences. At the end of the day, like one stark stat I'll give you is the open internet right now is about $50 billion, depending on what stat you believe. I think Facebook pulled about $250 billion. So just think about that for a second. 50 billion funds everybody else, and 250 billion funds one company. We don't need the 250 billion.
Plenty to go around.
Let's just get 50 out of there. Let Meta have 200, and let's get the open internet to 100. That's so much economic value that I think can completely reset the internet as we know
I think that's a great to-do list for everybody when we send them back out onto the Crozet. Before we get to hook here, though, let's end on one fun thing.
Absolutely.
We're in the middle of a hot, fun week. What is your life hack for surviving a week here in Cannes.
Well, the shame is we're all here, so I hope you all have comfortable shoes, but it is not fashion forward. Be practical, wear sneakers, it's fine. We're walking like crazy. Otherwise, hydrate, hydrate, hydrate. It is so hot, you do not want to
Rosé is not a hydration.
No, it is
strategy.
not.
Why?
No.
right.
And lots of ice as well.
Good tip. Andrew, thanks so much for being here. Huge thanks to Index Exchange for making today's conversation